KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth. KYJC, Commerce. KMWC, Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what about a game plan for someone who is late to retirement? Part 2. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. You can go to the Q&A, which is at the top of the website page, and send it in. I will get you taken care of. Love to get emails from you and know what, and if I can help you out, I certainly want to do so. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, an interesting article came out in the Wall Street Journal the other day, and it's an article that I feel a lot of people, the subject matter of which I think a lot of people are facing today. And it comes down to this: I am, whatever age, and I'm way behind on retirement planning. And so this writer talked about it in first person, the journey of being late to retirement and what he was doing along the way. And it got me to thinking, and of course we've talked a lot about this, is that I think the biggest problem with people not being prepared for retirement and feeling that anxious feeling of being behind, being late, simply comes down to kind of misunderstanding the whole concept of retirement planning. And I think that they get that misconception by listening to pop culture finance. Now, when I talk about pop culture finance, I'm talking about Wall Street. I'm talking about the business of financial advising. I'm talking about the media, financial media especially. And I started talking about this yesterday and decided that, well, I'm going to have a part 2 because there was just way too much to talk about. And so I never really can judge it. So today, here is part 2. As I said, this article was in the first person, and this writer was talking about him, the problem with being late to retirement. So I came up with 10 things to consider getting back on that road towards retirement. The first one was, and I hear this a lot in working with people, is simply this: I can't retire. And so I love to get into these conversations because my first question is, well, based on what fact, circumstances, scenarios do you see that you have a problem that you can't retire? And listen, I can't retire. I'm not going to retire. I'm going to work the rest of my life. And it's almost kind of this situation where people give up. And they're basing a very important belief and opinion on a kind of a guess. Doesn't feel like I'm on time. I really don't know what being on track even means, what it looks like, if they were to be honest. Maybe if you were to be honest with yourself. And so you just come to this conclusion: I just can't retire. And of course, which we'll talk about, pop culture finance doesn't help that. In fact, I would suggest that with everything they write and publish, they reinforce that feeling. For instance, this is my go-to pop culture finance reference. If you don't have $1 million by the time you retire, then you're probably not going to be ready to retire. I mean, there's this fascination with $1 million. And I'll talk about that here in a minute, but there's just so not true in so many cases. Number two, the key is to figure out when you want to retire, that desired age, and get creative. Build a plan on details and see what it would take to reach that goal. Because you see, I believe there's a plan for everyone. Now, this is the plan I'm talking about right now is the retirement plan that is the ideal plan. It's everything that you wanted. You didn't hold back. Now, take a look at that. And this is where a financial advisor can help and see how much it would take for you to save, put back each month, and earn each year to get to that point. And you might find out, well, if I commit to a certain game plan, I can get to the point to where, yes, I can get maybe 75% or maybe 50% of this, but not the whole thing. So that's when you start getting creative. That's when you start not cutting back, but you start lowering what's important to you. Because you see, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of what you value today, and sometimes today those values are concentrated on what's right in front of you versus what is 25, 30 years down the road. Or maybe what's 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road. I truly do believe that there is a retirement plan for everybody, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. It may not be your ideal retirement plan, but it's something that you can put together and something you can get excited about. Number three, advantages are there to someone young. They make it sound like, pop culture finance makes it sound like that if you're young, you got it made. You have plenty of time. But here's the problem with being young. Now, when you're young and you're single, it's probably the one time in your life that it's really pretty easy to prioritize things. You got plenty of money maybe coming in. You got that first job. And you can save and save money. The problem comes in is that the competition for money starts to get pretty fierce. You get married. You buy a house, if you can. You pay off those student loans. You have to get a new car. You have kids. Anybody that has kids knows how expensive kids are, especially this time of the year when they're going back to school. How expensive can August be? And that amount that you were saving when you were single was much bigger than what it is today. See, so I see no matter if you are in your 20s or your 30s, or whether you're in your 50s or your 60s, wherever you are on the age spectrum, it requires commitment and you to be intentional about planning for retirement, because there's always something. I don't care what age you're at, there's always some competition for your retirement money that you're going to try to save. Number four, see how much you have to save at a conservative investment rate. And this is what is extremely important, and I'll see this, is that someone will say, well, the long-term average of the stock market, and of course, based on what? Based on what number of years? Based on what criteria? And generally, people will come up with, well, so-and-so said it on the radio, or so-and-so said it on a financial broadcast. It's 10% a year. And so they plan for and save and assume they're going to grow 10% a year. I think it's a big mistake to be that aggressive with those numbers. Just like they talk about being aggressive when you're young. I think, and what ends up happening is someone who takes the advice of being, they're young, they take the advice of being aggressive, and they find out, you know what, I'm not really that aggressive. And then they go from one extreme to the other extreme, and they go too conservative because they didn't like what happened when they lost money. You got to be true to yourself. When it comes to planning, though, I think it's important to settle in on a very conservative rate. And if you can get the plan done at a conservative rate, then you really probably have a good solid plan. Aggressive investing to get you caught up quicker can be a recipe for disaster. You got to have a little bit of luck and a willingness to manage a plan that you're trying to be an aggressive investor. If I had $1 for every time I heard, well, I'm trying to catch up, I feel like I got to be very aggressive in my investing to get there faster. And it's almost like, to be aggressive, you flip a switch and you're all of a sudden going to be on a road to where you're going to get there quicker. The problem is you just don't know. Sure, you can be aggressive when the market's going up, but what happens when the market goes down? And as far as you went up in your accounts being aggressive, you can go just as far down in your accounts losing money. That's what they don't think about. People tend to forget, the market does go down, and it goes down serious in bear markets. More on that in a minute. This is Bob Brooks. I'm up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern day steward movement.
It's impossible to live the Christian life in your own power. But do you realize that followers of Christ receive supernatural help from the Holy Spirit? I'm John Monroe, and Wednesday on The Verdict we'll take a closer look at the life-changing power of the Spirit as it enables us to live a holy life. That's Wednesday on The Verdict.
The Verdict, weekday mornings at 10:30, here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
In 1 Corinthians, Paul reminds us to run the race of life to win the prize. Join me, Dr. Erwin Lutzer, for Running to Win. Be strengthened to finish your race with confidence.
Weekday mornings at 8 o'clock here on KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I was talking about 10 different things to consider when you feel like you were late to retirement or just retirement planning in general. The number 6 item is don't get hung up on where the experts say you need to be. Nobody knows where you need to be because they're speaking to the masses, and the assumption of the the writer on these publications is that if the masses would just do A, B, C, and D, they're going to get E. When it's so much more complicated than that, or you should be saving 4 times your income, or whatever some magic formula is going to be. It's important to know exactly, specifically, very detailed how much you need to save, once again, what that's needs to earn on an average, and how long that'll last you at retirement. Number 7, win the battle of what you want and what you are willing to do, and get committed. It's always a struggle you really want this retirement goal, but you're only willing to save this much and invest this much when it requires more than you're willing to invest, but you really, really want to hit this retirement goal. You got to be intentional and committed. And, it comes down once again for the competition of the dollars that you have and how far you can stretch them and use them to fulfill your values. And when we spend money, whether we save it, whether we spend it, whether we charge it, whatever we do, however we consume goods and services, where we spend our money is what we value. And we could talk about that for a long time. Just to stay on track, I got to keep going. Number 8. Now, some of you might think this is a little bit warped, but it is something that you can consider, and that is, will you be blessed to receive a family inheritance? Now, my disclaimer to that is that I wouldn't just count on that. If you do know it to be the case, I wouldn't just count on it, but I would keep it in the back of my mind as a potential. And that doesn't mean that you wish your family would pass away or anything like that. It's just something that you consider, that the potential of it being there is pretty good. You don't want to count on it, but it is something that you potentially could use down the road. Number 9, Social Security. Now, if you thought inheritance was crazy, you're probably thinking, Social Security, I shouldn't never count on it. Let me explain something about Social Security. Is that there is no set of politicians that if on their watch they're going to let this program die. And if you look at the numbers and you add the numbers up, Social Security can be fixed for a pretty good number of years into the future. Not permanently fixed, because that's probably impossible, but fixed to a certain degree that you can take advantage of it. Now, if I'm in my 30s, should I count on Social Security? You shouldn't not count on some type of Social Security, but I wouldn't say if the numbers, if you've looked up your numbers on Social Security SSA.gov, and it says you're going to get X amount of dollars, I'd probably split that in half, and if you got that, which is probably a little bit more of a realistic number. But the way that I would handle that is not to ignore it being there, but just to discount it, and discount it to the extent that you feel you're being realistic. I do think that we'll see some movement on that here at some point in the near future. After all, the trust fund does run out of money. I think projections are 2032, 2033, something like that. And what that means is that payroll taxes that you and I pay on a monthly basis that go to fund Social Security will be the only thing that pays out Social Security benefits. That's the only resource. You won't have the trust fund anymore. Say it's 2032. At that point, if things continue to go the route that they're going today, you would lose 30% of that benefit. So that's what you got to consider. So I don't think it's going away. I just think you don't count so heavily on it. Now, if you're in your 50s, I would say definitely consider that part of your plan. And if you take a look to see what kind of benefits you can get, you'd be really surprised. Number 10, you're going to think this is kind of odd, but think of the only thing that can get in your way of working, saving, investing, and preparing for retirement. That's how you treat your health. Obviously, if you don't take care of yourself, don't eat right, don't exercise, don't get enough sleep, basically do all the things that, we're a steward. Stewardship, we always don't typically think about just money, but we're we have to be good, prudent stewards of everything God gives us. God gives us our health. God gives us our body. We've got to take care of it. And that's the one thing that can get in the way of you realizing your retirement goals. So let's go back to our friend at the Wall Street Journal and add some commentary to their story. He says, my wife's workplace doesn't offer any retirement benefits, so I try to get away putting a little more on my end to make up the difference. Currently, 7% of my paycheck goes into my 401k. It's the most I've ever dedicated to retirement savings. I also contribute around $100 a month to the IRA, but I'm still behind. And what's interesting about that, still behind based on whose analysis? The thing that I read into his writing is that he's saving, but what's he saving for? For what kind of an income stream? For what are the details? Does he even know what it looks like? This is why planning is so very important. According to conventional wisdom, he writes, I should have at least 3 times my salary saved up for retirement by the time I'm 40. I have only 20% of that saved. And that's my issue with pop culture finance. Where in the world do they get 3 times my salary, and what does that even mean? And so I'll tell you what it means to most people is they read it and they go, I'm so behind. I'm not saving, I don't have 3 times my salary saved up, and I'm 50. And so what ends up happening is people get discouraged and they kind of give up. Fidelity Investments, the servicer of my retirement accounts, estimates that my retirement income will be around $9,400 a month if I keep saving at my current level, a rating it calls fair. $9,400 a month? That's a fair rating? I'm assuming maybe that's not, doesn't take in inflation. I don't know, but it's a little bit crazy to me. That estimate includes my 401k, but also Social Security, a safety net many millennials are doubtful will be there. Now, if they're being pretty aggressive on Social Security, I think that's problematic. But $9,400 is still a good amount of money. It says our retirement income would be around 60% of our pre-retirement income. So what could my retirement look like, and how do my wife and I realistically boost our retirement savings to get there? And he goes on and talks about his wealth advisor. His wealth advisor suggests, hey, you save more. You still have a long road of retirement accumulation. The notion that you save more to retire I think is poorly stated. We don't save more to retire. Retiring involves so much more than just saving money. And this is kind of where I'll wrap it up. It involves planning. It involves you knowing where you need to be at the end of each year. And this is not rocket science or anything that's hard to do. It's something that's an easy process to go through. It takes saving, yes, but it also takes investing. What portfolio of investments are you investing in? Does it meet your risk level? Protecting. What are you going to do to not only grow your money but protect your money? How are you going to manage it? And then maintain and determine if you're behind or ahead of your retirement goals. I know some of this may sound like a lot, but I think it's time well invested into a very important part of your life that the statistics show many people are not going to be ready for, which is retirement. So think about it a little bit. Think about how I think the first step is to call your financial advisor, have some numbers run, realistic numbers, and I think we all know what realistic numbers are, and get on their track back to sound, prudent retirement. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.